Welcome, everyone, to the Nerd Journey Podcast, episode number 35. We're joining you every week to talk IT career, news, and opinions based on our points of view. I'm your host, John White, at VJourneyman on Twitter, joined by my co-host, Nick Cordy, at NetworkNerd_. Hey, Nick, how's it going?
I'm doing great, John. I want to make sure our listeners know we are VMware solution engineers looking to bring the career advice we wish we'd been given earlier in our careers. Hopefully our career discussions will be relevant across disciplines and remain timeless. If you're enjoying our content, please drop us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you subscribe. And if you want to get in touch with us, tweet or DM at Nerd Journey. Ultimately, we're just two nerds on a journey.
A journey to virtual enlightenment.
So let's take a trip.
All right, Nick, you made a choice there. I think that was great. Always good to make choices. Hey, I know that after last week's first part of the Jimmy Tassin interview, you assigned us some homework to read the spotlight articles that he wrote about why Minecraft is on his resume and how it helped him in his IT career. I've got to say that even after reading those articles, which again we'll put into the show notes, I was still surprised in how the second part of this interview went.
I'm totally with you there. I mean, we've had some great interviews already, but I think this one has to be one of my favorites so far. You just never know what's going to happen once we hit record.
Yes, very, very true. Okay, let's get back straight into the interview.
Since you mentioned writing an article, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you about a couple of other articles you wrote about some things that really weren't about what you were doing at your day job, right?
Sure.
Because you wrote one about being a part of the Minecraft community. How did you get into that, and where does that come into the story that we've been listening to?
Sure. So I first got introduced to Minecraft at my first job at Bethesda. One of the MSPs, he would actually be a regular there handling a lot of the tickets, and he was really into gaming, and as I was. But I hadn't really gotten into PC gaming too much at that time, and he was mentioning Minecraft, and at that time I was seeing articles pop up because it was in the beta point at that time. And my first thought when I saw it, I was like, oh, this is like digital Legos. This looks pretty fun, but I'm not quite sure yet. But my friend there at my first job, he kept talking about it because he was really big into it. So he finally convinced me to get into it. So I got an account. And so I started playing some single player. And after a while, I think like everybody does, it's like, all right, I want to get on multiplayer, see what it is with other people, talk, maybe make some friends. And that process to actually find a server took me quite a while. For those that aren't familiar with Minecraft, a lot of the servers are more faction-based and raiding. So it's not exactly a safe place. You get on there, you try to build a base, and somebody just stumbles up and destroys it, steals all your goodies, and runs off, and probably kills you a few times. So that was kind of off-putting for someone new, trying to find a server that's a little bit more friendly, has a little bit more permanence, where I'm just not going to get spawn camped to death and rage quit the server. So eventually found one, and then at that time, that's when I switched to the credit union. I found this one server, and I was there for a couple months before the staff there realized that I was an actual adult and I could behave myself, and they didn't have to discipline me like every hour. Because I was reporting different things that would come up from other players, and they go, all right, we're going to give you staff now. I was like, okay, I can do that. And within that year, it's like I became just a regular I think it was a moderator, to an admin, and then eventually became co-owner, because it's like I was there for quite a while. They knew me. I was responsible. I helped with set some things up on the server. And around this time, trying to think. Yeah, around that time is when the owner of that server decided to close it. For whatever reason, just out of the blue, closed it. So the other co-owners and I decided, it's like, well, because we're actually getting ready for a big Minecraft update. Because with some updates, it changes how the world generates. So a lot of servers start fresh because new stuff is introduced to the world. You can't really introduce it if the world's already existing. Because Minecraft, as the world is explored, it generates everything as you explore it. So if all that world's explored, you can't generate anything new. So we were working on getting a new server, everything ready for the big update. The owner closed it, so he's like, "All right, well, just relaunch it with a new name because all these people that we knew didn't have anywhere to go." It's like, well, so we'll launch it, and that's when OmniCraft was launched. And it was the three co-owners, me included, and then a couple staff from the old server. And that's kind of how that part started of me running a Minecraft server.
How much of a time commitment was this on your part once you got to that level?
Actually pretty much from the beginning, it really was almost a full-time job. And because that's one of the reasons I ended up, writing articles, as you mentioned, about it, and even putting on my resume because after I think 6 months, no, actually after 3 months, one of the co-owners left, and then after a year, the other co-owner left, so it was just me for a while. And at that time, I mean, pretty much the entire time of it, it pretty much is its own little company that I'm running as a hobby. But again, it's like it's almost a full-time job because as soon as I got home from work, I'd be on my computer, jumping on the server, saying hi to everybody that's on the server, seeing if there's any problems that need to be dealt with, checking the forums, seeing if anyone's being harassed or anything like that, thinking of new ideas to put in the shop for people to send money to support the server. Yeah, I think probably on average spending 4 to 5 hours every night almost on it.
Wow. So just to be clear, I think most people think about games as something that exists. Maybe the server is being run only by the company that is publishing the game, but Minecraft is a game where individuals can actually host their own games and maybe tweak the rules of the world. So that's what you're really talking about when you're talking about running a Minecraft server.
Correct.
Am I tracking there?
Yep,
so really what you're talking about is not, hey, I was like a professional Minecraft player. As a small business owner, where what we were doing was publishing a specific type of Minecraft game and hosting players to play inside it.
Yep, that's pretty much it.
Got it. Okay, that is a lot more relatable, I think, to put on a resume, and so I completely understand that. And I think we'll put links to the articles that I saw about that and the lessons that you learned. But it's becoming a little bit more clear to me about the customer service aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're publishing the game, basically, or publishing the specific world and the rules, and maybe there's merchandise and artwork and things that people can participate in, it's really very much a customer service aspect of the game.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, whenever I explain it to someone who isn't into gaming or even know how Minecraft works, I always explain it to them. It's a company. It's a small company. Like any other company, I have employees. I had staff that I had to manage and help them develop their own skills so they can be independent on their own without having to ask me how to handle this situation, for example. I had to deal with all the finances. So tracking all the income and all the expenses, to prepare taxes on that stuff, setting up the shop, actual digital shop of where players could actually go on and spend money to support the server, figure out all the marketing to get the name of the server out there so we could get new players so they could, spend money, keeping the players happy, like you said, customer service. Minecraft is definitely an interesting one because, the average player base age was probably 13 to 15 ish. So, these are all young teenagers, and trying to convince them, hey, can you bug your parents to send a few dollars our way so we can keep a server that you enjoy online. So, I mean, actually, we did have to deal with that quite a bit of players would come on and say, I really want to buy something, but there's no way my parents would ever let me do this. I think once people got to know me and the other staff and how the server ran, it's like, we're just being honest and saying, if you're really interested, you can always let them know, hey, you can get a gift card, add it to PayPal and do it that way. That way there's nothing that can be hacked, stolen, whatever. And, if you really can't do that, then hey, go onto the voting sites and vote for the server every day, because those votes really help get the server name up higher in the search results. So I always gave them like a couple different options. Obviously, not everybody can pay. But yeah, having to explain that to kids, and I've always hear like managers trying to explain how to manage IT staff. It's like herding a bunch of kittens. Think about that with teenagers. It's kind of the same thing. Just trying to keep them organized, and especially around this time, when digital bullying was becoming a big hot topic in the media, of keeping that from happening too much on the server, because we did have to deal with that quite a bit of people getting on there, and all they want to do is just make everybody's time when they're terrible. They start cursing people out, they'd spam, they go on there and start raiding, destroying stuff that isn't theirs, and having to deal with things like that, cleaning things up after these spammers and all that, and trying to keep
Digital
everybody.
hooligans.
Yep.
It's funny, like all the problems that you're talking about are directly applicable to the real world. If you really think about it, it's like wow, these people, they're just defacing property and tearing stuff down. It's like, oh yeah, that's the same type of thing.
And I'm talking about all the management side of all this too, but as any other IT pro relate, there's a server that's running everything. So I'll admit I'm not a big Linux guy. I can do a few things in Linux, but almost everything that's run in Minecraft is on Linux because it makes hosting cheaper. So for the first couple years with Omnicraft, we'd go with a VPS provider to make that easy, because Multicraft is a panel that's installed on Linux pretty quickly. It makes it really easy to manage a server or even multiple servers. For example, Omnicraft, I think at the height we had 7 different VPS servers we're managing.
Oh, wow.
Yep. It fluctuated quite a bit, just kind of depending on the interest and budget, of course. But there's server management to worry about. And then when we decided we had enough funds to make things easy, well, not even easier, but I guess to stretch the budget a little bit more, we decided to look into actual server providers, cloud hosting, basically. I can't remember the companies we looked at, but actually going to just like DigitalOcean, for example, and spinning up a Linux server instance and then installing everything on our own. So like purchasing a license for Multicraft and setting up Linux from scratch to host all that stuff, setting up our own backups, managing all the firewall on the servers, for example. Because one thing that any game server administrator knows is DDoS attacks can be somewhat common. And so we actually had to deal with that quite a few times in the life of Omnicraft. Just some kid getting on there thinking we slighted them in whatever way, and life's not fair, so I'm going to make your life terrible, and go into one of those stress test services, and I'm going to kick them off for a little while. So having to deal with things like that, and then after a while we said, all right, we're just going to buy our own hardware and get a data center, because I had a new co-owner. His name is Adam, who was really good with Linux, a lot better than I was. And he convinced me, it's like, hey, there's a data center that's not too far from my house. We can buy our own server, set it up with all the hardware we want to. We'll just host in the data center, and this is how much it's going to save us in the long run. It's like, sure, if you feel comfortable setting it up, go ahead. So had that experience for, I think, about a year and a half of actually co-locating our own server in a data center. And we actually ended up getting kicked out of the first one because we had a DDoS attack, and it brought down all of their clients, and he was not happy and said, no, you guys need to get out of here within a week. So that we had to scramble to find another one.
Yikes.
Yeah, so
that's great, man.
Yeah, I'm sure, like I say, other IT pros can relate to some of these experiences. It's like, it's not just all games every day, all night, having to work on making sure the server's up all the time, figuring out those connections and keeping all the bad guys out, secured as much as we could.
Yeah, I mean, the way you're talking about this is it's standard IT stuff. except like you're exposed to the public, right?
Yep.
And you're forced to be on the public internet, and so you have to deal with a lot more um, like public internet interface stuff, like
Hmm.
DDoS. Distributed general service is like I I have to say, in all my experience in IT, if someone said, "Hey, how would you handle this?" I would be like, "Oh man, I would like assume my service provider was helping me with that,"
Hmm.
and then I'd just give it like a blank look. So to hear your experience and having to deal with it in the real world, like that's oof, a little bit of a twinge for me.
Yeah, so after a while, that's when I came to the realization of, all these experiences that I've got with Omnicraft, you know, all this is all translatable to my actual career. And that's kind of when I started writing up a couple articles about my Minecraft experiences and how I put on my resumes because, when I talk about the specifics of running it, it's all things that any person can take and expand on their own career professionally. And that's exactly what I did with mine. Because it was about halfway through the Omnicraft life cycle is when I left the credit union to move on to where I'm at now at the bank. And that was actually one of the talking points during my interview at the bank is the controller asking about this Omnicraft thing I had in my resume, what it was all about, explaining all this to him about my management experiences, the technical experiences I learned from it. And it's something that stood out to them because, not too many IT pros put some kind of gaming experience on their resume. So I think I granted that most gamers, they just game, they just play a game, but not many go that extra mile of running their own server and going through all those experiences. So that's why I put on the resume and wrote those posts of, yeah, most people look at it as just a game, but when you start breaking it down, like what I've been doing is, there's a lot that's unorthodox experience learning. It's something that not everybody sees in the traditional light of, you can take it one-to-one relatable experiences. Um, and honestly, that all came back from my time in the Navy, because I think anyone that's in the military has to learn is how to translate their experiences from military to civilian. So that's pretty much where a lot of those skills came about of figuring out how it relates in ways that a traditional business mind can understand it.
I'm really
Yeah.
curious at what
Mhm.
point into the Minecraft experience did you think, oh, this is relatable? Did it just kind of flip a switch on at some point, or was that feeling always there as you went down the path?
No, it definitely took a little bit of time to get that realization. I think it was probably within the first year of running Omnicraft, uh, of realizing, this is more than just playing a game, that I'm actually starting to kind of operate a company. Because at that point, I was getting to the point where it was just me running the whole show, you know, thinking about, wait, I've got all these staff that I'm training as I bring them on, working, dealing with all this customer service with the players on the server, trying to market it out, the server issues that come up because Minecraft, like any other piece of software that any other IT pro has to support, there's going to be issues. That's just the software itself. There's going to be issues with the server itself. There's going to be issues with the connection between the client and the server. So as I was going through those processes after a year, it's like, oh wait, these are all things I do now in my job, and I could do in the future. Especially on the management side of getting into management. It's like these are all things that'll help me sell my next job of getting into management. Because I think anybody that looks for management jobs the first time, it's hard to break into it unless you have experience. And that was one of the key moments of, hey, I should write something about this so other people can think about this too, of how to get management experience outside of the traditional sense of IT management.
That's just such a great lesson to learn, especially with something that, can start as a hobby and grow. Is like, what
Mhm.
lessons am I learning from this that can translate over? And how I especially enjoyed what you said about um, thinking about how to pitch this for the next job discussion,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
And
because
that's
I was going to
a lot
say,
of people aren't thinking about that, right?
yeah, because especially when you're talking to management who, especially management that aren't IT savvy, that understand IT for full, and I have in my resume, hey, I've got this game server. Most of them, the orthodox, the tight tie, the straight suit, that kind of thing. They're probably going to look at that. It's like, oh, he plays games all day. I don't know if we can get anything from him. But when I start breaking it down to them, to anyone that kind of doubts it, you know, they start looking. It's like, oh, okay, so there is a game aspect, but then there's this whole other side of everything that's going on behind the scenes that any other company in the world deals with. From the scale is always different, of course, but the basics are there for every company, and then that's
And
how I translate it to them.
and I'm sure it all had to do with the framing, right? Like if you said, "Yeah, I'm super into Minecraft," then it really does present as, "Oh, I really enjoy playing Minecraft." But if
Hmm.
you say something like, "I've run a small business which provides like a gaming community experience,"
Hmm.
and gaming service, provide as a gaming service provider, then that's like a completely different framing that presents it as a business, presents the professional aspects of it, and not just, hey, I'm super into this like hobby that I have.
Right, because I mean, if you take the bullet points of you got server management, customer service, uh, account management, all that. You wrap that up and you look at it, put it in different packages. All right, so mine is Minecraft, but what if somebody else comes along and it's a web store? All that same stuff applies there. What if it's um, they're running their own MSP, as a single person shop? I mean, it's all the same stuff. It's just a different wrapping of mine happens to be Minecraft, but for somebody else it could be, whatever it is, their own small company.
Very cool. What was the feedback in the Spiceworks community to those lessons learned? Was there a lot of crossover, or people who appreciated that type of experience?
Have to think it back a little bit because I've actually gone through the posts a long time, but I know that those first ones I wrote up definitely got over 100 spice ups, thumbs ups, however you want to look at it. And I did get a lot of replies to it. And I think a lot of that too is because responded to a lot of the replies, like people asking a little bit more details about it or commenting on certain parts of the stories. Just kind of expanding on it more and letting them know that here's how you can look at it in a little bit different way, so it makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, yeah, totally
It looks
understand.
like at least one of these, actually probably both, have, as you said, over 100 spice ups, almost 100 replies each. So a lot of good feedback
Mhm.
there. I think that's fantastic. What I'm really curious about, Jimmy, is after you used that relatable experience to get your job that you have now,
Mhm.
were you able to maintain your community involvement with the Minecraft stuff, or did that change somehow?
No, I was still able to keep the involvement. Um, I think it was about that time, about a year and a half to 2 years with Omnicraft, and I did close it down, and not because of the time with my job or anything like that. It was getting to the point that I was getting burnt out on it. Um, 4 years, a server lasting 4 years is quite an accomplishment in this on the Minecraft side, because the one thing that makes Minecraft server hosting so difficult at that period of time was it was so easy to spin up a server. And I saw it numerous times in Omnicraft. Even some of the staff that I had left at one point to start their own server because they thought, hey, I got all this experience, I'm going to do it myself. And I'd always encourage them, because that's one thing I always wanted in my own bosses is encouragement. It's like, hey, if you're going to leave, you got all this experience, go for it. I'll answer any questions you have so you can start it yourself. But then I'd always add to it, it's like, just be prepared. If you want this to work, you're going to have to put the work into it. Um, and that was one thing is, there's a lot of kids, from young teens or not even teens to, like 18, 19, that, hey, I'm just going to spin up a server and it's going to be a faction server, which was the most common style of Minecraft. And I'm going to get all this money out of it. I saw that so many times. All these kids think, I want to make so much money off of this server, you won't believe it. And they barely last a few months because they don't realize how much time goes into running it and keeping a server operational. Even something as low key as factions, which is it's pretty straightforward to run it. It doesn't involve a lot of maintenance because they tend not to have a lot of rules, so you don't need a lot of moderators. You just worry about people cheating, not the actual customer service of keeping everybody happy and handling griefers. So yeah, again, I saw that a lot with a lot of kids thinking they could run their own. Saw my own staff; they would jump out, leave for a couple months, to come back saying, "Yeah, it just didn't work. I couldn't. It failed." And so it was really kind of interesting to develop. And so getting on to 4 years, I was getting really burnt out on it because I think after a few months, it was definitely within the first year of Omnicraft where I actually stopped playing Minecraft itself, of actually getting into a world and building things. Because I spend most of my time, besides all the other tasks, of actually building things within the server for the community. So I'd build mini games, for example, or build up the spawn area so it looked really fancy and nice, different areas they could explore, secrets they could find, that kind of thing. Spent more time building environments more than just playing a game to enjoy it. And after 4 years, it's just like, I can't really do this anymore. I'm struggling coming up with ideas to expand it. So I had the realization, I've let the staff know like a couple months ahead of time, like, on this date, I'm going to have to cut it off. I just can't do it anymore. I need to step down as owner. And it was nice seeing at that point because I kind of dropped this out of nowhere. I didn't really give them any hints, other than giving a couple months to think about it. But within like a couple weeks, they're going, all right, we're gonna form up our own team. We're gonna start thinking about how we're gonna manage our own server and take it over from me. So then I helped them through that transition because my thought at that time is like, I really want someone to take it over. I just don't want to shut it down, like how the server I was on shut down suddenly. I'd like someone to carry it on. So that was my thought of helping them transition and develop their own server. And it has developed. It's been running quite well. It's called VentureCraft now. Just helping them so that way it wasn't as much of a struggle for me to learn as much. Gave them some of the funds that I had, as much of the funds that I had from Omnicraft as I could, help them get started with their own hosting and all the knowledge transfer, and let them take over. And at that point I stepped down because I just couldn't play Minecraft anymore. I was just so burnt out, and let them take over.
It's interesting. Like, did you ever watch the HBO show Westworld?
No, I've never seen it.
Okay. It's that world building and storytelling and exploration aspect of it that I think either you should watch it or you definitely shouldn't. I can't figure out which one to recommend right now. If it'll trigger you or if you'll really enjoy it because it's happening to somebody else. It just reminded me of that. It's nice to see that you wanted to have that smooth transition, because I assume that the community you had built up, they kind of feel equity in the server, right, at that point, because they've built things, they've spent time and energy in your community and on your servers and not somewhere else, and they don't want that to just disappear and have to start from scratch somewhere else. I assume that's how it works.
Pretty much, yeah. I think it's the same with any long-standing community. Everybody, feels they have some kind of possession over it. They identify with it. We actually had many people start relationships up from the community because they both, these couple people just happened to play on the same server and got to know each other. And I actually know one couple that ended up getting married because they met on our servers. So that was pretty cool to hear. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of possession that any community has to deal with. And I just remember, when I had to deal with the shutdown of the server I was in before it transitioned to Omnicraft, was just that feeling of loss when I've heard out. It's like, wait, this server I've been playing almost every day on, that I've got these friends on, it's like, it's just gone. I can't connect with them anymore. So yeah, that was my thought in my mind when I announced to the staff, is like, I'm hoping someone will take it on, because I just don't want that to happen to all these people that have this investment into it.
Now, here's my thought. When someone lays down a project of that size, they usually find some way to fill that time with something else. So what did you do with that time after you laid that project down?
Ooh, that's a really good question. That was actually something I had to think about for quite a while because I really wasn't sure. I even had quite a few conversations with my wife about it because that was one of the reasons I let it last as long as I did, because there was a few times before that where it's like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. But at the same time, it's like, what else can I do? So I think after a couple months, I just kind of spent some time um, no, that's not the right word. Kind of grounding myself from the experiences, trying to not be emotional about it, because I think anybody that does something for that long, they start getting really attached to it. So I was trying not to get too emotional about it. And it took me a little while to get through that process, I guess a grieving kind of process, basically.
Sure.
Part of that time was spent helping the VentureCraft community get on their feet, answering questions, being on the server maybe every couple of days in the week, talking to people, helping them with that transition. Because even though I'd made the announcement to the community, they all knew me as well. It's like, oh, we don't want you to leave, and so I just didn't want to just disappear on them because that didn't seem right. So I was still somewhat active within that for quite a while, for a couple months, even to the point of helping run some events on the new server to help get keep that interest going, because we had quite a few events running on the Omnicraft one. So help with keeping those running. And then it kind of expanded into, well, let's have some events for some other games. So I had a few of those. I hosted a couple of those. And then from there, it kind of developed. There's a lot of interest. And it's like, all right, well, I asked the community, are you interested in if I start up a Discord for this? And there's a lot of interest. So that's when I started up the Discord, Omni Gamers. And I've been pretty much running that ever since. So initially started off with just running events for the VentureCraft community. And I named it Omni Gamers kind of as a callback to the Omnicraft, but also to separate it out from the VentureCraft. Because one thing I learned from my experiences with Omnicraft, everybody identifies with, the name, brand, however you want to look at it. So I definitely understood, the power of a name and a label. So I, had to call back to the old server and had it something different. So that way there is a little bit of separation in case, if the VentureCraft staff if they couldn't involve themselves fully, or they didn't have the time, or there wasn't any interest, it wasn't tied to them and on their shoulders. If anyone wasn't happy about it, it'd be on me, because it's a separate thing. So
It's so funny. Sorry to interrupt. It's so funny that you were maybe burnt out on the Minecraft part of it, but you were still interested in the community part of it and the community building. And that, so when you took something up, it still included that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's pretty much how a lot of my online gaming has been. My first online game that I really got into, for example, was Spiral Knights, and I ended up playing that for I think 3 years. Even during this time running Omnicraft, there's a little bit of that. And I really, I like the Spiceworks. I really get into the community aspect of things too. Of here's all these people I'm making friendships with, even though I don't know them, in person, or if I've ever met them in person. I still have a friendship with them. There's a bond there. So expanding that, especially with a lot of the players during that transition, because they really knew me so well. It's like they have a place they can come where they can talk to me. Where I don't have this owner status that everybody looks up to, as I'm like some kind of demigod or something or whatever. Where now I'm just a regular person that they can just talk to.
Peer.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, totally relatable.
Well, and I think you definitely have a talent for keeping things going that are important to you. If memory serves, the Spice Buddies program that started at Spice World a few years ago by a guy named Darren Schoen, the idea was for people who had been to the conference several times to give the new people the lowdown on how to get the most value out of it. And if I recall, within the last couple of years, you kind of picked that up and spearheaded it, didn't you?
It was within the last year. And that was an interesting situation. So I remember when the Spice Buddy program first started, I thought it was a really cool idea, but I didn't volunteer the first year. I hung around the guys, talked to them because there's a lot of the people I knew within the community. Um, and then the second year, it's like, all right, yeah, I'll help out. And then for the last year's Spice World, um, Darren was just gone. Like he wasn't responding to anybody. Uh, so all the Spice Buddies were like, what are we supposed to do? The guy's not here to kind of lead us, and um, you know, everybody was kind of lost. So I'm thinking it's like it was kind of like how Omnicraft started. Of somebody needs to fill the shoes. I have skills that could probably do it, so it's like I will just go ahead and jump in and do it. And so reaching out to the Spice World team and letting them know, hey, have you heard from Darren? No, well, I'll go ahead and start talking to me about all this planning, and we'll start figuring things out. And so that, like I said, I just kind of jumped in, and I didn't know everything about it, so that's when I reached out to the rest of them, the Spice Buddies, of hey, you guys, especially those that did it last year. It's like, hey, start pitching in. We'll start figuring things out. And all I really was for last year was just the coordinator, more or less, just making sure things were getting set up when they needed to be set up.
All I can think of is a scene from Star Wars where Obi-Wan Kenobi says, "That boy's our last hope," and Yoda says, "No, there is another." That's what it made me
Mhm.
think of, because you just picked it up and, like you said, you coordinated it and you kept it going. And
Mhm.
I love that pattern is present in you, because I think that's a really cool thing. Not everybody would have the desire to just jump in and help out, because you didn't do it for yourself, you did it for the community.
It's kind of funny you mentioned that. Made me think of something that was supposed to be drilled in my head during my time in the Navy, especially during boot camp. One of the common ways to interpret Navy was an acronym, which was never again volunteer yourself. It's something that's never stuck for me. Like all the through this conversations, like it's always been situations where I just jump in because nobody else is going to do it. And like with Spice Buddies, because I saw how everybody got a lot of value out of it, and if I just really didn't want to see it get to the point of it just kind of fell apart because Darren wasn't there. And well, I don't know Darren personally. I knew him a little bit enough that it's like he'd want somebody to kind of carry it on. So I just jumped in and said, "Hey, let's start getting the planning going, guys. Let's figure this out." Because I just didn't want it to fall apart.
And I think that those actions on your part are part of the reasons that you were recognized as Spiceworks champion. What was it, 2016 or 2017?
Yep, 2016.
Now, for those that don't know, the Spiceworks Champion Award is something that's given to a person who has been very active, but an advocate for community and community participation among his or her peers. So congrats to you, man. That's a high honor.
Thank
You're
you.
among elite people.
Well, I'll let you say that. I'll never say that about myself. You know,
That's why I said it.
yeah. I mean, I'm just a humble person, and it's not to make myself look good or anything. It's just honestly with the things that I do and in the community, for example, really anybody else can do. It's just I just happen to be the one doing it. Um, and just so everybody knows, like I got the award before last year's Spice World, so I've had it for a little while. I think a lot of that came around because my involvement in the community in other ways. Like I've done a lot of webinars for Spiceworks. Like I started out, I've done 3 Active Directory and group policy webinars with Little Green Man and I'm blanking on his name, Rob. Rob, the PC, the capsaicin. We did a few webinars,
Oh,
and
okay.
then
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
from there, because at that time Peter was running, then it transitioned where I've been on a control tech. I've been on the air a few times. I've been on a few video meetups. So there's a lot of involvement in other ways. And I've actually mentioned to a few other people recently, because everybody kind of talks about stats within like the spicy peppers, for example, of, you know, oh, this person has so many best answers and helpful posts. And, you know, I kind of say, if you probably looked at the stats for Maces, I probably have to be ranked the lowest for best answers and helpful posts, because I must have like the worst luck with that, because I really hardly ever get any. I'll blame part of that because the first part of, or for quite a while, I was mostly involved in web development, because that was things that, you know, that was a topic I was interested in a lot, and very few people give those in that group. So I think that's part of it. But you know, I've after a certain point, it's like I have a hard time, especially now. I have a hard time actually answering questions, because now they're so specific to certain things that I don't even have a clue on. So I contribute in other ways, like writing up articles. Like the group I'm most active in now is general IT security, because security is such a big focus of mine, not just professionally but personally. I actually mentioned this in my topic when I covered security, no, not last year, but the year before, that I got into security from the AOL days. This was back before anyone even knew what phishing was. You know, I was just in high school. I got on my AOL account. I had this email from what it said was an AOL staff member saying, "Hey, we saw some weird activity on your account. We just want to verify that, you know, the account is under your possession. So if you could go to this link and put in your credentials, you know, just to prove it." You know, again, it's like, I knew nothing about security. I knew nothing about phishing. So I typed my credentials in, didn't think anything about it, no problems. And the next day I come home from school, I sign in, and I was like, my account's locked out. It's like, what? So I called AOL, and it's like, yeah, your account's locked out because you're sending a whole bunch of spam. It's like, oh. And then it was like one of those things that just kind of clicked. It's like, oh, I need to be more careful. And then it's just developed into like this pseudo passion of mine of, you know, always trying to keep myself and everybody I know secure.
Nice. That's a hilarious story. Is the making the mistake and then as a result, uh, growing from it, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, Nick and I are both cringing.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
How about you mentioned a couple times giving some talks. What giving talks at Spice World? What kind of led you there? I imagine that it's part of that same thing of, you know, the passion of sharing and wanting, you know, to help develop other people. But that, you know, it's a large stage, right? So how did you develop those skills, and did you develop a, you know, similar passion for doing that as well?
Some of that was from like the webinars I've done before, but the first Spice World I presented at, I was actually invited to be on a marketing panel, and that panel was about how to sell to IT pros. I had actually been on a similar panel before on the phone, I think it was. So they invited me in to talk about it. So it was me as the IT pro, and then I think two other marketers, and we're just kind of having discussion with other marketers about how to actually talk to IT pros, and that was really interesting for me. Um, and then the next year, I thought, it's like, well, that went pretty well. You know, what could I talk on? It's like, and after thinking about it, it's like, well, I have a ton of experience in active directory and group policy. I did a few webinars. Like, I'll just talk about that because I'm sure there'll be plenty of interest. And it ended up being one of the more popular talks that year, and so just kind of expanded. But I guess getting ready for that kind of stage, to be honest, it was something I've somewhat used to. And by that, I mean I've had a few exposures of being on a big stage. For example, in the Navy, when I was going through training for my job in Pensacola, I was on the drill team for the Navy in that base. And part of that was we would perform the colors at a local hockey game. So, like, the few of us would go out on the ice in the middle of a stadium, you know, for the national anthem, present the colors, walk out. So it's like that started, and then we actually marched in a Mardi Gras parade for the town. So like the whole group of us that were practicing, like we were actually in the parade, I think there was 20 of us maybe, and we're just spinning rifles, and performing in front of, all this big crowd. And then when I went to the ship, the Carl Vinson, before we left Washington for our tour, they invited uh, the base to a Mariners game. And for that, they asked the color guard, because I was on the color guard on the ship, to come out and perform the colors, parade the colors for the stadium. So that was definitely one of the biggest stages I've been on, of being in a completely packed baseball stadium out in the middle of the field. I'm not doing anything intense, just carrying a flag out, but doing it information and not thinking about it, staying focused on what I had to do and, doing it right. So I kind of was like, well, if I did that in front of that big of a stadium, it's like, it can't be that bad talking to a bunch of IT pros. So I just kind of went from there and presented on actor director group policy. Then the next year was on security, and actually presented that one twice because that got selected to be repeated. Though the second time slot was after, I can't remember his name now, one of the keynote speakers that year. It was David Mitnick, I think it was. So I had to present mine after his. So that was interesting. And then last year's was on two different topics. One was building business continuity, disaster recovery, and basing that around Jurassic Park, and then building a home lab. And actually, I was kind of curious. I ended up asking the Spiceworks team about that, and they said, I think there's maybe one or two other people in the history of Spiceworks ever presented on more than just one topic. So I'll have to say that was kind of nice to hear.
Yeah. It's tough to get to subscribe yourself and split your attention and plan and prep for more than one talk on that scale.
Yeah, it definitely took a little while to get both of those ready.
Yeah. The next trick is to then just participate in panel discussions after that, for your third and fourth. I think that's what Scott Miller was telling me once.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you should moderate a panel next time in addition to doing the talks. That'd be fun.
Well, that's technically what the home lab one was an unofficial panel, because it was me, Colorado Geek, and Lee Young. I kind of let Colorado Geek and Lee do most of the talking because they have more experience with home labs than I do.
Gotcha.
Very cool.
So
do you have any advice maybe for people who are looking to accelerate their career? Like it sounds like you've gained all these skills in a variety of traditional and non-traditional ways. So any advice for people who are looking to maybe do their first presentation at a conference?
Well,
how to get there?
Yeah, if you're considering at all being a presenter or being a speaker at a conference, even if it's just a passing thought, build on that. Think about something you could spend an hour talking about. And if even if it can't be an hour, think about questions that you can bring up during your discussion, your talk, that engages the audience. Ask them questions during that because that'll kind of help expand a little bit. Because the thing is about being a speaker, obviously, public speaking is one of those things that so many people get nervous about. And I still get nervous. I've done quite a few, and I still get nervous. But one thing that has helped is not to vision the audience naked. I don't understand how that ever works, but it was something I picked up from one conference I went to. Is instead of thinking about how you're feeling before a presentation, being nervous, thinking about it as being excited. Because they would say, it's a lot of the same body reactions. You get a little sweaty, you get the butterflies in the stomach, but you feel that both by being nervous and excited. So kind of do a little bit of mental trickery and think about, it's like, I'm really nervous talking in front of a bunch of people I don't know of, and turn that into, well, I can share someone in the audience has to be there to learn something. There's something that I can share that they don't know. That's been the case for all my presentations. Is I try to share as much detail and share links as much as possible, because there's always that one person in the audience that's going to go, "Wait, I didn't know that was even possible." That's what the presentation, being a speaker, is all about, is sharing something that somebody else doesn't know. There's always going to be at least one person. So think about that you're going to be sharing that experience with somebody else so they can better themselves.
Yeah, so focusing on your goal and the whole reason you got into the thing in the first place, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. And I like that idea of transforming nervousness into excitement too. You're right. It is a lot of the same, like physical reactions, and all it is a change of framing, right?
Yep. And then as for career progression, I think, I guess the general message from my experiences is, if you're at a point in your career where you're feeling stuck with the traditional sense of progression, that everybody sees as orthodox, look into other, unorthodox ways. Like for me, it's, besides Minecraft, there's also been Spiceworks, sharing experiences on Spiceworks and being more involved there. Because like I said, it all started off with writing a couple articles, and then next thing you know, I've been invited to a webinar, and then that went well. So they invited me to another webinar, and then they invited me to an actual show, flying me into Austin to the headquarters, actually be on the show that they're running. So, take little steps and of something that's outside of what people consider traditional training, and see what works for you.
I really like that advice. Thanks a lot. Nick, before we wrap up, is there anything that you wanted to ask?
So last question from me, Jimmy. As you look forward in your career, what do you think is the next role for you? You mentioned your manager, IT director. Do you see yourself moving up to something like a CIO, or maybe deciding to go in a different direction someday? Just curious.
Sure. I think ultimately I would like to get into a CIO, or probably even a CIS role at some point, because again, security is a big passion of mine. Um, but I guess with like pretty much every other part of my career, when I changed, is I'm just seeing what's out there that happens to stick, and in being successful.
Makes absolute sense to me. Jimmy Tassin, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate talking to you.
I'm happy to be here, and hopefully not everybody gets bored with how long this has been. Hopefully it's been a little bit entertaining and hopefully educational.
Now, we do talk a lot about the John White School of Mentoring on this podcast for those who need advice getting to the next level. I think you have a lot of advice to give people, Jimmy. So, can people reach out to you somewhere to ask questions and interact with you if they have follow up questions on this episode?
Sure. So they're welcome to reach out to me in Spiceworks, Jimmy T. If you want, I can give you my profile link later, or I'm sure you can find it pretty quickly. LinkedIn, I could probably give you my profile for that, but or if maybe something a little bit more casual, they're welcome to jump on to my Discord. If they go to omnigamers.net, just takes you right to the Discord invite. So there's a couple different ways I'd be happy to reach out to somebody and talk with them.
Awesome. You heard it here, folks. Pricing and packaging to come.
Twitter, the only social media I do is LinkedIn. I've never been into Twitter or Facebook or anything like that.
All right, cool. Good to know. Jimmy, thanks so much for coming on and spending time with us and telling just some really cool stories.
I'm glad you let me share them, and you enjoyed them a little bit.
Well, that was a great interview, Nick. I was surprised at how involved running a Minecraft server was. Essentially, I think I said this, it was a small business.
Yeah, I had no idea the level of effort that went into it. But I have to say, the way Jimmy was able to leverage that as relatable experience to get to the next level was really impressive. That coming at it from what some may consider an unorthodox standpoint. I like it.
Yeah, totally agree. Another great lesson that we just keep on needing to remind ourselves. Hey, anything else pop into your mind before we break?
The only thing I can think of is, there are a lot of great untold stories out there. Maybe someone out there has an even different way that they leverage relatable experience. And I know we'd love to hear about it. If you have an idea, tweet it out to @NerdJourney. because we always want people to subscribe and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. We want to know if we're being helpful and are always looking for questions to ponder.
Awesome. Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White at VJourneyman for Nick Cordy at NetworkNerd_, signing off.
Adios.